question is, would it matter which part of the tomato we sample? Probably not a big difference there. I do want to tell you that the first tomatoes that come in the season, usually, my experience is that they are low bricks. And then we get a higher bricks as we go through the season there. You want to use yours, John? And
okay, so we have a digital as well, which the older you get, the more you like the digital. The younger you are and on a budget, the more you use those. And once you go to these, you don't go back.
Okay. Okay, so you want to do this?
You squeeze the juice and you press the button. And you look at the number.
And it goes right here.
Just squeeze it. About 300, 310. So that's why you put it in the budget, and then once you got it, you got it.
Yeah.
It needs a little more.
A little more?
It's got to cover.
Okay.
Which one are you doing? This
I'm
one?
doing this one. Yeah.
How's that?
That's good. That's good. Great.
Okay, so the number here is 4.5, but I want to actually just go back and throw a little water on here and calibrate it, make sure I got the calibration good. So just any water, tap water, distilled water, will give you the calibration. Calibration means you set water at 0. So the 0 is water, and if it's not calibrated, you just push a little button that says 0, and then that calibrates it. So it's a 0.1. So I'm going to calibrate it. It won't change it that far. So it was real close to being fully calibrated. Every so often do that, and it's ready. So whenever you're ready to put another one on there.
Yellow one.
That's the one I just
did.
did.
Oh, that's the one you just did. Okay. 4.5. Okay. Let's use our ripened on a vine tomato and see what it does. These are about $2.50 a pound at Walmart. Whoops. Yes.
Try both of them. Both meters.
Okay.
Oh, to see if we get the same.
Here, let's use John's here first.
300.
So then you just put the start button, and it'll give you a number. 3.0.
Okay, this was ripened on the vine, 3.0.
Right on your, these are your bricks there.
Sure.
Lynn, this was supermarket?
Yes, this was supermarket.
Lynn, can you move that water bottle out of the way so I can see what you're doing? The water bottle's in between you. Thank you, sir.
Whoops, thank you, thank you. Good catch.
Good save. Good eye.
Okay, somebody want to read that for me?
So you can play on my team.
Jess?
You may have to focus the eyepiece.
This is 3.4.
3.4. So it matches pretty close.
Pretty close. And do you ever calibrate this one as well? Have you put distilled water on here to calibrate it?
I have not, John.
Okay, so you just put a couple drops on here. I'm not. You would loosen this here knob, I believe, and then you can set it at 0. So there's a way to calibrate. I haven't done this in a while, and then this brand I'm not from. Oh, there it is. Okay, so it's underneath here. So you got a little screw right there, and so you need to set all your meters need to be calibrated to 0 with water. Any water will work. You want to try that? Let's just see what water does, because it might be a few points high. It's right on 0, so it's
Okay.
good. These hold their calibrations for a long time. So 3.4 is essentially the same thing, though. It's low quality.
Yes. Yes.
John, how would you interpret if the line is sharp or very diffuse in the refractometer?
I didn't understand, Ronald.
So sometimes you
Roland.
measure the level in the refractometer, and the line sometimes very sharp, and sometimes it's very difficult to establish where
Yes.
where the line is.
Yes.
And I understand calcium makes a difference. And
In these readings, the line was very sharp. What we're looking at, you all can look at this, use one of these, but there's a round, when you look at it, you see a round picture there, and there's white and blue, and where the two come together, is what Roland's talking about. Sometimes that line is very sharp. This is sharp here. Sometimes it's very blurred. And I'm going to ask John what the
Okay.
difference is.
The sharper typically is lower calcium or higher acid, and it's very sharp. The better quality you go in whatever you're measuring, the more the diffusion. Because I've used both the digital and the optical, go to the top of the diffusion for your number. Okay, and that's going to be right what the digital gives you is the top, and the more blurry the better. As you get more blurry, the more you like the digital because it'll give you the actual number.
Okay.
Also, if you're trying to do okra, that doesn't have any juice. That's got slime. You can put the slime on the digital and still get a number.
But you won't get a reading on this.
It doesn't do too good.
4.2.
4.2. We're not having much luck with these, are we? Okay, what about the... Okay, this is the cheapest tomato at a $1 a pound, 99 cents a pound.
But would you also say a smaller tomato would have higher bricks reading than the bigger tomato?
Usually,
We got a small one right here.
we have a small one.
Sure.
Oh, great, great.
The answer is yes.
Yes, yes. Roland's question is, does the smaller tomato get a higher bricks? You'll get a higher bricks usually on cherry tomatoes. So that's good for us here. Yeah. Yes. Here.
Right there.
Yeah.
It's a good thing to do at a farmer's market.
Yes, it is. But
Very popular though.
There's con artists that don't grow their own. They go and buy it and resell
Let's
it.
guess what the bricks is going to be.
8.
Can we
You
taste
get a
it
prize?
Diane, you want to read that for us?
Well under 5.
You want to read that?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Oh, great, great. Mary, you want to use that? You want to use it? Okay. Read that for us.
It's already there. The juice is in there.
Is it blurred?
You have to get it.
This is one of those black tomatoes, huh? Yeah,
3.8.
yeah. Okay.
Can we try John's?
Yeah, let's try John's with this. Okay.
Do you need to rinse it out?
I dried it already.
I got a bunch of seeds. Do I need to take those off?
No problem.
Okay, so hit start. $2.5. Is that right?
Well, you can check it on the other one too, but it might have been. But take a taste. You can see if it tastes really sweet.
Yeah, let's do that.
Oh, say they're not sweet, and then they've probably given an accurate answer. Affected having all this stuff.
That was 2.5. And if that were in my garden and I tasted it, I'd throw it over the fence.
Oh, I feel upside down.
Cherry tomato?
Yeah, it was a cherry.
Tart to me.
Whoops. Okay. Now, let's see. This one's yours. Okay, Randy brought a nice big tomato. Let's see what it is.
It's definitive. As you said, if the line is slow.
Okay, do we have a refractometer close we
There's a
can
guy who
use?
makes a kit. It's the same bricks, the same refractometer, but he has a vice grips.
Dan Kittredge.
Do you, yeah, what was that?
Dan Kittredge.
Okay.
Luke has
Winters has it.
vice grips that work nicely. Luke
We'll
has
wait for
vice
Luke
grips
to come.
but Luke's not here yet.
It's got a little press in it, basically. That
Yes,
little tip
it's
on
just vice grips, but it's got
Yeah.
a little V welded into
Yep.
it, and man, you can take leaves and you can squeeze
it.
juice.
Alfalfa, you can do all sorts of.
Yes,
Works well. I have one.
there. Okay, I'm gonna get
I don't
this.
have a digital.
Lynn, let's get, did you mix that tomato?
I didn't yet.
Maybe someone should buy the other one.
Nervous, Randy?
Okay, let's see what I do there to set it back to 0.
Well, it didn't get
Just-
rinsed out.
It wipes off. Okay, we'll put a little rinse on it then.
Okay,
That was when you turned it on, and there's nothing in it. Then it just gives an L reading. It doesn't work.
okay,
So just put it in, and we can.
we'll try.
You have to turn it off and then back on again?
No, you don't need to.
We got enough in there?
Just a few drops to cover the base. Yeah, it'll probably be good.
Okay.
3.7.
3.7, okay. Yep, tastes like 3.7. Here, okay.
Tomatoes are the kind of the top crop that's the hardest to get up, and when you don't have a good amount of sugars or sunlight and a lot of keeping the energy up really steadily, it's hard to get. You just don't get high bricks tomatoes automatically.
This has been one of the worst years for tomatoes
It's the
around
worst-
here.
it's a bad
There
tomato
is,
year.
so that's an indicator.
It's
And good fertility program won't overcome all the weather effects. It just will not.
So define keeping the energy up.
That's what I'm going to talk about. It's using conductivity in the soil, keeping the conductivity at an acceptable
we
level.
have a refractometer we can use.
Do the bricks readings go up in the afternoon after it's had a day of
That's the leaves.
Who wants to use it?
The leaves will move up and down some,
but not the tomatoes?
not so much.
So, is there a correlation between the EC reading and the bricks reading?
If you keep the energy up in the soil, you will have better bricks reading.
But if you, like, for example, if you had a tomato and you took the bricks reading, could you make an assessment as to an approximate EC reading in the soil that came from?
I'm not that good.
I don't believe that for a second.
I could probably look at a soil test and tell you maybe where your bricks might end up at.
Okay.
But not the other way around. Yeah.
A little over 4. Okay, so best ones were the first ones, these. Yes. And they were,
Did I hear you can check alfalfa in those?
yeah, we'd have to have a
Yes.
press for that.
You want to use this?
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to use for next?
No, let's do the carrot.
Carrot? Okay, we're going to do the crab apple too.
Oh, okay. You want to do the crab apple next?
Whenever you're ready. Just doesn't matter. Whenever you want to do it.
Let's do the crab apple.
All right, you know what? I'm going to clean that refractometer off.
Okay, yes.
That's a crab apple?
We got a crab apple in here now, okay? And your garlic press works pretty good. Okay. Can we eat those? That came off that tree, and we can. That's a 14.0. 14.0. Hey, that's a 14.0. Are you okay with people taking a taste of that?
We're eating
Okay.
them tonight, guys, and we're having caramel apples with the crab apples on the tooth. Go,
They're really
you're
good.
more than welcome
really
to try.
good.
They're
Okay.
very good.
If you would like to taste the difference between 3.5 and 4 tomatoes and 14 on that, help yourself. Eat an apple. Eat one of those crab apples and cut a piece of tomato and taste the difference.
John, is International Ag Labs having another contest?
Yes, I was kind of busy through the transition when things were busy with International Ag Labs. Dr. Scott passed away, and I dropped some things. But yes, we're going to go back to the green beans. We're going to finish that one up, and then we're going on to carrots and strawberries.
We all know about the first prize is
$1,000,
second prize.
500.
For the highest brick?
No, highest nutrient dense.
Okay.
And that butternut squash samples that was in the packet, we're going to be doing that same testing on beans and carrots. and on strawberries. The strawberries don't ship very well, so it's kind of hard to do strawberries.
Okay, is this clean? It is. Ready for us to use.
What is that one?
This is a
Let me
carrot.
talk about that up there, and I will talk about that. Just bring it up, okay?
I need to clear this, I guess.
Just put the new one on. It's not going to
Okay.
be a problem.
Okay.
It'll start all, when you hit start, it'll start all over. Yes.
What's an average apple rate? Because I would assume it's always
Randy,
high.
I need somebody with a strong grip.
Average for what you should be.
It's your carrot.
I think you're gonna
Okay.
make carrot
What are you
cake.
kind of?
Cut
another piece.
Cut another piece in there.
14 is pretty decent.
Okay, you're gonna have to cut it in smaller
Maybe
pieces.
not to the top, but that's pretty decent.
Okay, put that
10
in.
is gonna be kind of poor, 11 poor.
Okay.
But I haven't
Okay.
done crab apple.
Need a strong grip, and I'll hold this here. And just, yeah, we're getting a lot of
It'll
pulp.
work actually with the pulp.
Will it work with the pulp?
Just get
Okay,
enough in there and it'll,
we're close.
kind of a wet pulp, it'll be enough to read the wetness.
Juice down in there.
Is that enough, or we're not quite covered?
I think we just want to kind of cover it like that.
Think we're all right?
We'll try it. If it doesn't work,
off there.
you got juice
Yeah, yeah,
dripping
you
off?
got juice, put it up.
7.2. So
Can't see anything. Not,
now I'll tell you what I do, and I didn't bring it because I wasn't really prepared for it. I do a mortar and pestle, and I do a vinyl window screen mesh of about a 2-inch by 2-inch size. So I cut it out. So I take a mortar and pestle, little stainless steel ones are really nice. They're only about this high, and just smash it to a pulp. And then you get average. All the cells are ruptured, the water in the cells are broken, the water between the cells are and it mixes very good. From that pulp, you squeeze it just gently on that window screen mesh and you get pure juice, even from carrots, really easy. So that's my preferred method. Second one is the vice grips. You put a piece or a sample of the carrot inside that vinyl mesh and then squeeze on it with those lips on the vice grips and you'll get juice coming off. That's my second preferred method.
So what's the number for carrots? You said window screen.
It can go from probably
Thank you.
6, 5, maybe 4, somewhere in there is the bottom, and it goes up to 15 to 18. Really good ones will be in that 18.
Yeah, let's do the beans. These are your beans too, or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
You bring it in the cover
Could
on
you
it.
stand to the side just a little bit?
Snap those up. Or?
Can you stand right next to it?
Yeah,
There you go.
Thank
there you go.
Get on film that way.
Sure.
What was the reading on the
Is that enough? Time to squeeze it?
If
Yeah.
that don't work, you can always
Go
stop.
ahead, and we're gonna have to,
Okay, that one.
well, let's do, yeah.
Should carrots.
You know what? I don't trust it entirely because it might. We should probably do that with the mortar and pestle on the carrot because it was a little air in there.
Doing a little rinse.
But
Have you ever used a Vitamix?
that would work. That would essentially make your pulp, and then you just pour the juice off. That would work. You want at least 12 on a carrot. Don't less than that is not as preferred.
I have a question,
Enough.
That's good.
John.
Yes.
So does
good.
the value go down the longer it's out of the ground or off of the tree? Did you answer that, or did anybody else that?
You wanna read this for us, Lynn?
Is the longer that it's
It
picked, or
actually dehydrates, so it goes up.
so your value would go up in
On
nutrition?
Yes.
5.3.
5.3. Well, we got a ways to go on these. There. 5.3 on the green beans.
John, what
There.
would win $1,000 on a green bean?
Well, that's what the nutrient density analysis and the nutrient density score. And so you would have to have the highest score. The highest score wins it. Okay, so we take the measure of minerals and the bricks and combine them into one to get one single composite. But 2/3 of those points comes from the minerals per 100 grams. And only 1/3 comes from the bricks. That way, if they breed it for sugars, but the minerals aren't there, that kind of eliminates that.
Okay, We didn't get anything with high bricks here. Nothing.
Well, crab apple.
Crab apple
Oh, the
wasn't too
crab
bad.
apple. Crab apple, yes. Yes. What's that? Yes. So let's move on to the soil here. This is the way I do the soil sample. Okay, this is one we took this morning.
Did you go to the other side of the table?
Yes, and they want me to stand over there.
You're a good
Okay.
man. I don't care what your wife says about you. I think you're
Okay,
all right.
is that your purse? Is that your purse? Can I stand right there? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Is Sergey here?
We're here.
I'm here.
Oh, hey, there you go. Okay, this soil sample came from this couple's property. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And we went out in their field. It's nice sandy soil. I like that part of it. And we took what, about five or six different samples here. And I wanted enough so we got a pretty good feel for that field. It was a little over an acre. And part of the field you could see was more fertile than others. The lower part was a little more fertile there. Another thing Sergey's done there is to plant yeah, but what was the clover?
White Dutch clover. Yeah.
White Dutch clover, which adds to the fertility. And I didn't realize this, but I got a few ants in here too, so there. All right, so you'll end up with about maybe a gallon of material. You want to be absolutely sure that it's clean. You don't want a polluted sample. So use a shovel that has no rust on it, and go down about that deep, and just take a slice out of the whole thing and put it in your bucket. Now, I haven't touched this since this morning when I was out on their property, but what I want to do is just mix it all up good so we get a good representation, a good average of that field. If I have roots and grass and whatever, I want to take it out. Can't see with the bag up. Okay, I'm just mixing this up there. All right, let's call that good. And if you'll use a quart Glad sandwich bag, Ziploc sandwich bag, that's just about the right amount of material. Or, John, you've got the little envelopes over there that they could use.
Here today, yep.
Yeah. So I like this because it fits well. And you know what we didn't do is fill out that form. Did you fill that form out? Okay.
So Lynn, all we need is 1.5 cups.
Okay, all we need is 1.5 cups. Okay. We'll give you plenty. Yeah.
Bits of chips.
Yeah. Sergey, Lisa, just fill that out.
Can you clear that end of the table off so you can, I don't have your back.
Oh, sure.
We check your spelling.
I can get my name, maybe.
Spell your name right.
Okay. After we left Lisa and Sergey's place, we stopped by their post office, got the small flat rate box. Okay, if you live any distance away from International Ag Lab, this is the least expensive way to send it because it's heavy and this is a flat rate there. So we put this in, fill that out, put it in, and send it to International Ag Labs, and that's it. Pardon me?
Label the bag.
Label the bag. This will label it there. Yeah.
So do you recommend doing the boron test every single year that you're pulling a soil sample?
Depend.
If a budget's tight, you can skip it the first year, but I would suggest, yes, do it the first year, and then watch the notes on the bottom of the recommendation. If I think you need it, I'll tell you. If you don't see a note, skip it the next year. So essentially, it's every other year, but sometimes if it's really low, you might need to do a couple years in a row. Make sure you test it. I do not put boron in the recommendation if I don't test it. So if it should be tested to start with.
That's it, I think.
What's an approximate
I got your
turnaround
name and
when you
address.
get-
Oh, you got name and address
2
in
weeks
there.
total time. We
we're
email
okay.
it back.
And we paid too, so.
You're all paid. You're all set. All set.
Alrighty.
All right. So this goes in the box with it. You're going to know this one came from the farm because it's got lots of dirt and sand on it.
I can carry it too to save the postage.
Okay.
Check.
What's that?
Don't seal it, we need to put a check in there.
Oh, we
Did
We
they say
will.
they paid?
Okay.
You paid?
yeah, this is all paid.
Oh,
So
they
we
paid
need
you.
This is all paid. And so now you take it to the post office. There's the post office.
So this came from you though, right? Essentially, you guys
It's
took care of
it's
it.
theirs. And their work is in it. They've already paid me, so I pay you for that.
Bill you.
Yes. Yes.
You don't want to double
All
that
right.
bill.
All right. If anybody wants to taste poor tomatoes with that, you can. And we've got a question? Yes.
I've done tests with some other companies, and one of them advised wearing latex gloves because the sweat from your hands might contain salt, and that would contaminate the sample. Is that not a concern, or what do you think?
It could be a concern. I wasn't worried about sweating today. So, did you have a comment on that, John?
You can probably do it with a trowel. You can probably do everything with the trowel and not even touch it.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you can just use a wooden spoon to stir it up, and
Yeah.
then you don't have to touch it that much.
Yeah. Okay, this is James 1:5. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given him. It will be given liberally and without reproach. In other words, God doesn't blame us for our ignorance or stupidity there. So since we have such a great invitation from the Creator himself, let's ask him for it. Father in heaven, you've offered to give us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And so we ask for wisdom today. We ask for uncommon sense and understanding. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, I need to, thank you. I need to correct, I got called on this last night about the ocean water. The mineral content of the oceans and the Dead Sea and the Great Salt Lake, the mineral content is in the same percentage. The amount of water to salt varies considerably. If we go to the Dead Sea, it's much saltier than the ocean. If we go to the Great Salt Lake, it's even saltier. So we have to adjust. If you went to the Great Salt Lake and got some water out of that for your garden, you'd have to adjust because it has much more salt and far less water in it there. Even the oceans vary some. If we were to go to the Red Sea, there are no rivers going into the Red Sea, just hardly any creeks going into it. So that's saltier than if we go up, let's say, along the coast of Norway, where they have all that water and waterfalls going right into the ocean. That water is less salty. So we find variations even in the ocean there. Another thing that I wanted to make plain was that, what's that? Okay, I'm being told where to stand. Okay, thank you. Thank you. But one thing I wanted to say is that we've talked a lot about ocean water and the benefits of it. Please, it is not a health food, okay? So you might substitute it for the salt that you use on your table, and we need some salt in our cooking there. But again, we need the right balance. Now, we have a lot of salt in our bodies. If I cut my finger, the blood is salty. If I get a tear or a drop of sweat into my mouth, it's quite salty. We have a lot of salt in our bodies. We'd die quickly if we didn't have it there. But if I were to eat as little as 4 teaspoons of salt right now, that could be a lethal dose. So out of balance, what is essential for my body would kill me. Matter of fact, some years back it was a relatively common thing in China to commit suicide by taking an overdose of salt there. Now, I want to give you another idea about the salt that maybe will help. In 1 stick of celery, just 1 stick of celery, there's more salt, more sodium chloride than most people shake on their whole meal. Yeah. We all know people who at some time have been put on a salt-restricted diet. Maybe a man has some heart trouble. Maybe a woman is pregnant, and so they're on a salt-restricted diet. But you never hear that doctor say, you're on a celery-restricted diet. Okay, what's the difference? These minerals that are in the ocean are in a crystalline form. No animal, not even the insects, can use those directly. Only plants can take that up. So the plant takes it up through the roots, and through photosynthesis in the leaf, those crystalline chemicals are converted to colloidal chemicals or an organic food. They're combined with carbon from carbon dioxide in that leaf. Now that food has become an organic food which is very healthy for you. So is it possible that with all of these other minerals that are in the ocean water, is it possible that the similar thing could happen with them as like happens with the celery? That we could eat more of it and be absolutely safe if we eat it in the organic form. I'm not telling you that, I'm asking the question. It seems logical. Now, since we have all of these minerals in our body in a proportion, in our blood, in a proportion very similar to ocean water. I don't think that's an accident. I believe the Creator did that. They're there for a purpose. Matter of fact, a few years ago they discovered that arsenic in very small amounts was necessary for human health. Okay? The more they study, the more things we discover are necessary for human health. And I believe if we study enough and long enough that we'll probably find out that all of these minerals are necessary for optimum human health. But perhaps here's a way of getting those things into our bodies. Don't eat the salt directly. That could be very toxic to you. But get it through the plants there. Okay. Oh, Elizabeth says there are 8 refractometers left out there if anybody wants them, so you can get them at the break there. Okay, wanted to cover a few things that we didn't cover yesterday. One is making the rows and double digging. We borrow this from Midlighter, Making the Rows here. And you'll see that, well, I want to point out that from the center of this row to the center of the next row over here should be 5 feet for most things. And you may look at that and say, wow, that's a lot of wasted space. When you start growing this way, you'll want that space. By the end of the season, you'll want that space. If we have small things like carrots and beets and whatever, we can make double rows here. Or we can even make small rows that go across like this there, so that you kind of have a bed of it there. For most things, from here to here, 5 feet on center would work. Now, then we come back and we make about 1 foot from this string to this string is about 1 foot on top. We rake the pathway here because we broadcast that fertilizer all over the garden. We rake this pathway here and make a slight hill here, and then we make a dam, a berm on this side and on this side. So by the time we go from here to here, we've got about 16 inches. And then we've got another row over here where we're doing the same thing. That's going to leave us 3.5 feet for walkway in between. All right? Now, if we're growing melons, pumpkins, something that's going to vine and sprawl all over the place, you may want to make these rows 10 feet apart because you need that area. But for most gardens, especially a small backyard garden, this 5 foot on center is a good thing there. Okay. All right, there we are making those rows level. That's important. Double dig. Okay, the purpose is to loosen the soil deeply while keeping the topsoil on the top and the subsoil underneath. So you remove the soil 1 shovelful deep, let's say in about a 2 foot square area. Place that in a wheelbarrow or box or something. Just dig that hole and put that soil off to the side there. Okay, now we've got a hole in the ground. It's about 1 shovelful deep. Now go down below that and loosen that soil in that hole as deep as your shovel or fork will go. That's called double digging. Do not take that subsoil out and put it on the top. If you take that lower soil out and put it on the top, you're making a lot of problems for yourself down the way. We want the topsoil to remain on the top. We want the subsoil to remain on the bottom. Whoops, I stepped off the line. Yeah, gotta keep me in line. We want that subsoil to stay on the bottom. You'll make it much easier for yourself if you leave that subsoil down there. Now, when you get a soil test and recommendations, that soil test is for the way that most people garden, which means that we're talking about 8-10 inches maybe of the topsoil being treated here. There. If you're going to double dig, especially if it's a first-time garden, when you're down in that hole and you're loosening the lower level, that's a good place to put some amendments there. Remember, we're doing the math. We want to talk about the volume of soil that we're treating. So if you want to put some of those amendments down there, that's a good time to do it, especially the first time that you're making there. That means that if we have a 500 square foot garden, and you're conscientiously double digging, that you might want to have enough fertilizer for a 1,000 square foot garden. Okay. Anyway, do the math, and we'll know how to do it for you. Okay. When you get to the okay, we got this hole. We loosen the soil. We put the topsoil into a wheelbarrow. Now the next 2 square feet that we're going to dig, we're going to take that topsoil and we're not going to put it in the wheelbarrow. We're going to put it in the hole that we just dug. Okay? Now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go down and loosen that soil. We want air down there. We want microbes down there. We want that soil to become alive. Now we've got the second hole dug and the soil on the bottom of that loosened. Now we go to the third one and we take that soil and we put it in the second hole there. Now we keep doing this so that we're just moving the soil. The topsoil is just moving 2 feet, 2 feet, 2 feet. When we get to the end of the row, we've got the soil that was in the wheelbarrow. Run it down there, dump it in, because we're going to have a hole down there that doesn't have enough soil. When you double dig, you're going to, because you've loosened this soil and put a lot of air into it there, it's going to be slightly raised there, and that's good. That's fine. And then if we rake the soil from the aisles, it's going to be a little higher. And then we don't need a big high hill like this. We need a relatively small hill, maybe 3-4 inches raised here. So if we get a big rain, your plants are out of the flood area. And then, well, let's see if we've got a picture here. Well, this is just more of the double digging that. Okay, making the markers there. Okay. Okay, we're going to rake the soil from the sides to build up about 18-inch wide rows using a level. Now I use a 2x4, about 8 feet long, and just put a carpenter's level on that. Keep that fairly level there. You can, in about 30 feet, if you drop or raise 2 inches, it's not going to be a big thing. Level is important. If you go all over the world, you'll see that lots of civilizations farm hillsides. In almost every case, they make terraces there. Otherwise, your soil runs down, you lose it, and your fertilizer runs down, your water runs down. Make it level so that the water will soak in, and you won't lose your fertilizer. You won't do damage to your soil. Okay. Also, it'll help you with weed control there. Build up the dikes on either side. This will hold water if you're watering in the plant bed, and it helps to eliminate weeds there. Okay. Okay. The question is, do we double dig the whole garden, or do we just do the beds? And then how often do we do it? So the first question is, do we do the whole garden? If you have the energy, it's going to help. In my own gardens, I take a place that's maybe 2.5 feet, and I'll double dig that. And where I'm going to walk out here, the rototiller does the whole garden, and that's what I do. I'm 73, I don't have the energy that I used to have. Now, how often do we do this? Every time we plant, okay? Did it in the spring. I just replanted a small area for some winter garden things, and I double dug again. The double digging will get easier, and our goal here in the double digging is that we want about 20 to 24 inches of loose soil there. Now, don't be too hard on yourself if the soil is too hard to dig that first year. Just dig it as deeply as you can. It'll be easier next year. But do it every year. A good test is if you double dig one row and you just single dig the row next to it, and you plant both rows with the same fertilizer and the same seeds and the same plants the same day. And you'll convince yourself that there's good reason to double dig.
Psalm 19, 1 through 4. I can just about quote it, but I'm probably going to say it wrong. It's the one that says, "The heavens declare the glory of God." Okay, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, no language, where their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and the words to the end of the earth. So we see great beauty in the stars and in the heavens every night. And every language can read that it's beautiful. And It's my belief that man is called to be the steward of the earth. And we are the stewards. And we are made in God's image, but we have the potential for a lot of good or evil. We can make something really good. And so it is my own personal desire that the earth should come under good stewardship. And where we see the songs in the heavens, the earth brings the same echo of that beauty that is in the heavens. Okay. And that's our job. So beauty is something that's really nice, and you see a lot of that here, and you feel that right here on this place, and it's really nice to be here. So one thing I forgot, for those who are not on my mailing list, if you came through the traditional foods, I actually have 30 articles for gardening. It's called gardeningfornutrition.net, and you can sign up there. gardeningfornutrition.net. Okay, just to sign up, 30 articles. Okay, the other day I asked a question, what is a plant? What is a plant? Well, you know what, before I go on to that, I'm going to talk just a little bit briefly. Al Wagner's he's been doing soil testing with us since 2008, and so this is 5 years right here. And it's really interesting, we're always trying to build up the calcium. So he started with 755 on the phosphorus. 1,094 on the potassium. This is all pounds per acre. And then 1,183 on the calcium. Okay, so what we want is a roughly 18 to 1. 18 to 1 here, roughly. So we're not even close. And this is a very common pattern where a lot of organic material has been applied. You get the phosphorus rising, the potassium rising, and the calcium is low. The reason that happens is that the potassium is competing with calcium on the clay colloid. So it's like it just grabs and pushes somebody right off the chair and sits down in its place. So the calcium gets pushed off from the potassium that's in the compost or in the manure or the organic material, and then the roots suck up that calcium, use it, and then it's gone. Okay, so what happens is when you frequently apply compost year after year, in effect, you lower your calcium. So if you need potassium, which this soil does not, this is like, should be 200, maybe for tomatoes, could be 400, it's way over. Now, it's not the worst soil by any means, but that is very high. And so you go through this stack of soil reports, and we started putting more calcium on. The calcium would kind of come up, and slowly the first year the phosphorus and potassium did not drop. The next year they began to drop, and that's why I put notes on the recommendations. Do not use any compost or manure, because we see that. Now compost, if you feel it, it's well made, it feels good, doesn't it? Feels right. But it isn't what your soil needs many times. When this starts to go down, especially the potassium, when you get it down to about 200, I'd put a little compost on. When it's below 200, I'd put a decent amount, maybe, but the amounts I use are 50 pounds per 1,000, 100 pounds per 1,000, because it's fairly potent. Okay, so if we go through this year, the whole 5 years, you can see that here's 1 year in 2012, it was up to 2,000 on the calcium and 500 each on phosphorus and potassium. Last year in 2013, 1,700 on the calcium. So there was quite a drop. And sometimes you'll see years when calcium just drops. A lot of rainfall can drop it. it just is a little variable. Sometimes a broad area, it can just drop. But the phosphorus and potassium are continuing to slowly go down. And so 444, it's about right. Well, it's still pretty high. So that's just the crafting of soil takes time. And so you need to kind of come through every year, make sure your calcium is up, keep working on the traces, and it's helpful. Any comments on what you've seen, Al, for just growing through these years?
Well, back, the reason it's so high, because I thought the best thing was to dump more manure on, and I literally dumped a lot on. That's why I got so out of whack. But before that, we had like carrots in the garden, there was virgin soil, they were super sweet. It got to be my wife didn't want me to grow carrots because they got so bad.
So you said after you had the whole lot of manure, you tried to grow carrots again. They were not sweet, they were bitter. You didn't want to eat them.
Yep.
Yeah.
I could grow them. This year I'm growing them, they actually taste good. I didn't break them yet. But they,
Okay, so now the carrots are good. When that calcium is up really high, when these two are moderate or lower, you know that the bricks is going to be good. The taste is really going to be good. This here is a rest. You know for sure this is low bricks. You can look at those numbers and know they're close to a 1-to-1 ratio. They're not going to taste good at all. Question was asked, can you buy an ideal soil and start out of the box really good? That's kind of everybody's dream. And a lot of people are trying it with potting mixes, and that's a pretty tough one. You know, it really is. I think that it's possible if somebody went through the hard work, let's say they had a field and they followed the program really good. They didn't mess it up with too much compost. They used it moderately, and then they did the minerals, and they got it really good. Then they took that field and started selling it in for raised beds. That would work, you know. It's hard to do that. The reason why it's hard is because calcium does not become available except through microbial digestion. And you can put limestone down, but that doesn't mean you have available calcium. And so much hinders on calcium. And let me just kind of go through a little bit of this. I think if you want to look at these year-to-year soil samples, I'm sure Al would be happy to show it to you. And so here you can look at them. Question in the back. The question was, what happens when you have high potassium in the soil? Does it go from a protein to a carb? Well, you have a cell, and calcium is supposed to build this cell wall. And what happens is that the plant can actually substitute potassium in instead of calcium. And that will allow extra water in the cell. So you get a weak, watery cell, which is really the definition of low bricks, and it rots quicker. Okay, so if you want quality, you have to have calcium building that. Now here's the thing, it sounds a little self-serving, but it is what we have observed. When you use a modern soil test, like with an ICP, with a Malik 3, or those other more common tests, the typical results that you get say, put more potassium on and your calcium's fine. If you split samples and you send it to our lab, we frequently will give the opposite. We'll say, your potassium is fine, but you really need to work on the calcium. And when you do that and you actually change it, the results from this lab are correct. That is, that you will see an improvement in flavor. Okay, so a lot of times people are adding more potassium based on the soil test, and they're actually doing the wrong thing. Okay, somebody asked, how can you judge which lab to use? And I said, well, you know, you need to just study it a little bit and then make a decision with your heart who you believe and trust and stick with it. Okay, so that's one answer there. Question?
What were the calcium and magnesium ratios on the test?
Calcium to magnesium started about in the 4-to-1 range, and then as the calcium has come up, it ended at about an 8-to-1. Now, a lot of soil samples are quite short of magnesium, and I've begun using quite a bit more Epsom salts in the program, or K-Mag in the program. I don't use dolomite because it's too easy to overdo the magnesium when you use dolomite. Okay? I wanted to go back one thing on the soil test because I haven't really covered it. There are growth and reproductive energies associated with each element. I'll take your question now and then I'm going to get into this. What's your question?
I just had a question.
Question was asked if we've done like testing on virgin soil or forest land that hasn't been touched. Yes, and typically the tree crops can manage in this environment, but typically it's very low potassium, very low phosphorus, quite low. It's mid-range on potassium, so not oversupplied, and it's usually mid-range on calcium. Now, if you go to the east, it's kind of low like on almost everything. You go to the eastern, like Vermont or any of those places, and they have virgin soil, it had never been touched, it's extremely depleted. So nature is not having everything perfect. It does the best it can, okay? So what we have is nutrients kind of can get divided into two. So you got things that promote growth and things that promote reproduction. Okay, so growth. Chlorides. So chlorides, sodium, nitrates. So this is nitrogen in the nitrate form. Potassium and calcium. Now what I'm teaching here is a real simplified understanding of what Reams taught. So this is Reams' theory with my way of wording it, okay? And over here on the reproductive side, you have urea or ammonial forms of nitrogen, okay? So protein, urea, ammonial forms. So liquid fish is going to be reproductive on its nitrogen. Okay, you have phosphates, sulfates, magnesium, all the trace minerals, and all the organics or carbons. Anything organic and carbon, the carbon portion of that is all reproductive. Okay? So you have growth here, reproductive here. And somewhere in between is where this energy falls in your soil. So let me ask a question. How much chlorides do we want to grow a good crop of food?
Just enough.
Just enough. So maybe, somewhere in the pounds per acre, right? Just like a pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds, somewhere in there. It doesn't take a lot. Chlorides are useful for bacteria. If you apply a little bit of sea minerals, some kelp meal, some ocean fish, some PGR, you're getting some chlorides. Okay? You don't need to worry about chlorides. How much sodium do we need? About the same as the sodium, up to 10 parts per million, pounds per acre. It doesn't really matter. Let's just call that, it's in the ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, somewhere under 10. It doesn't take a lot. Again, those same sources will provide sodium. How much nitrates in pounds per acre do we need per acre? Just take an average. Okay, we're needing nitrates somewhere in the tens of pounds per acre. Tens of pounds. So 10, 20, 30, 40, somewhere in there. On a soil test or that's what we're looking for, tens of pounds. There is a danger of overdoing nitrogen. You go back to You go back to this cell, if you overdo nitrogen, you're going to actually get weak watery cells. That would be alfalfa hay that just dehydrates and it just shrinks. There's nothing left of the crop. Or things that are so watery that they rot while you're bringing them home from the grocery store, okay? That is a bad cell. So too much nitrogen is dangerous. These are all on the growth side. Now, I've been talking a lot about potassium. So how much potassium do we want in soil? Do we want none? No, we want potassium. How much? We'll call that hundreds of pounds, right? Somewhere in the hundreds of pounds. So if you're growing grass, if you're growing turf, and you want good grass, you would have maybe about 100 pounds. If you're growing tomatoes, you maybe want 400, 500 pounds. If you're in greenhouse, 500 pounds. If you're growing tree crops, 500, 600 pounds. So anywhere from 100 pounds to 600 pounds probably. Yes?
So if you're saying 400 for tomatoes, still trying to carry that 18-to-1 ratio, so calcium should really be...
No, you can change, that can be reduced a little. When you increase it for that crop, the ratio is a little variable. That
is ideal for tomatoes.
Figure about 5,000 pounds of calcium and 400 or 500 pounds of potassium. So it's about 10-to-1.
Thank you.
Okay? Now, so there's a reaction between this and this. And when you have that about right, you're going to get excellent crop growth. So how much calcium do we need in the pounds per acre? 1,000. See the pattern here? Okay. It's very important. And I'm going to make a statement that thousands of pounds. That varies. So the certain crops, somewhere around 1,000 would be your minimum, but normally you'd need more than that, and some crops take, that 4,000 or 5,000 pounds. And some soils have much more than that. You get certain parts of the country, and they are built from calcium carbonate, and you can't get less than 5,000 to 10,000 pounds. But there's the range. So you got pounds, tens of pounds, hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds. Now here's my statement. So all of these, you want your trace minerals to work good for you. You want the trace minerals from ocean water or kelp meal or the sulfates from fish. If you have this to work right, you need to react it against this. Okay? So imagine I have a tennis ball here and I'm bouncing it. I have to have something firm to react it against, to bounce it against, right? If I bounced it into a soft snowbank, it's not coming back, right? So you need to react this against this, or you could say you react this against all of these. Okay, here's the statement. Calcium is the main growth energy element to react all the reproductive elements react against. So calcium is the main growth energy element that all the reproductive energy elements react against, because you're very limited on how much you should have of the other ones. They should be there, but they should not be there out of proportion. A lot of commercial agriculture substitutes an excess of potassium in for a lack of calcium. Guess what? A lot of organic guys do the same thing. They use different sources, but they're putting in way too much potassium and they're not addressing the calcium. And that's going to give low bricks organics. Okay? Any questions on this? Go ahead.
You were talking about the calcium levels in certain locations. When does calcium become a problem?
Question was asked, when does calcium become a problem? A lot of times you can see calcium levels at, let's say 6,000 pounds, and you see a pH of 8.1. That pH is tying up a lot of trace minerals, and that's a problem. because trace minerals are equally important in growing a healthy crop. So the further west you go, where there's more deserty soils or lack of rainfall, the more the high pH ties it up. So calcium is one of the contributors to the high pH. So we have to add acids. So we have to, the solution is we can't take anything out, so we just add acidity. And one of the ways is we use an acid fertilizer called ammonium sulfate. So ammonium sulfate, so it used to be that they had a little bit of stuff coming out of the smokestacks, and there was sulfates coming into the atmosphere, and it would come down, and when it would rain, the growers would get free atmospheric sulfates coming from pollution. And that actually kind of helped a lot of soils. And they've cleaned it up because of concern for the lakes and the fish and the acid rain. And so now what they do is the smokestacks, they drop in like limestone and they different things, and they basically clean that up and chemically refine it to become ammonium sulfate. It's coming from where we were getting it for free, now you have to buy it. Okay? You can use some gypsum to get your sulfates, but that doesn't give you the acidity very well. I like to use Inferno as an acidifying drench. So it's got extra sulfuric acid, the pH is 2.0, and you put it against a pH of 8.1 and you water it in, and maybe the next time you soil test it might be a 7.6 or a 7.7, and it begins to drop it down every time you drench with that. So you work one side against the other. So you work a high pH against a low pH, or a low pH against a high. And you will think about, you work growth energy against reproductive energy, and these are ways you create energy for which your crops will grow. Yes?
This may be really basic, but I'm not sure where like limestone or powdered lime comes in.
The question was, where does powdered limestone come in? We have the typical limestone is about a 9.5 pH. The product that we recommend a lot is called carbonized limestone, or the actual name of it is called triplicity. And that's got a pH, we mixed in some powdered humates, which are low pH, and that's got a pH of 7.5. So we got a limestone that's 7.5. So a lot of times we'll see a soil report from the lab, and you've got a pH maybe of 7.2. And I'm recommending 30 pounds or 40 pounds of carbonized limestone. The reason is the calcium's really low, and we have to make some progress. And if we do less than that, we're actually going to go backwards in improving our calcium level that's available.
So that's lime's part of calcium.
Limestone provides calcium, but it's the base. It's calcium carbonate. Okay, I'm going to change subjects and get on with the subject I'm supposed to be talking about, which is, I talked yesterday about what is a plant, and we discussed that a plant is an accumulator of energy, and then it's a reformulator of energy. It reformulates the energy that it accumulates into whatever it grows, into apples or carrots or whatever. Question is, how does it do that? And so I want to address the how and just take a look at a plant. Is the black color coming through better, Harold? Yeah. A little better? Okay. So here we have a plant, and we have leaves all over, and more leaves, and we have roots that come off, and there's a whole tangled web of roots. What's that? Yeah. I didn't pay anything for it. I create pictures with words, not on diagrams very well. Okay, so what we have here is solar energy collectors, more commonly called leaves, right? But that's what they actually do, is they're collecting energy. They're collecting heat energy and the electromagnetic spectrum, and they are making carbohydrates. Here we have roots working here, and this is a microbial haven. It's a haven for microbes. So there's a lot of different ways to look at a plant, but if you take a look at the top part of a plant, it is more than just a solar energy collector. Here, what we have here is my apologies to all the spelling teachers, but I'm not very good at antenna, okay? You have an antenna here. This top portion of the plant is an antenna. What do you suppose the bottom portion is as well? Another antenna. Okay? So there are two antennas, or you could say a double antenna. Okay, so we have in this room, we have multiple spectrums of frequency happening, which we do not hear right now. We have many radio stations, we have TV stations, we have a lot of stuff going on, and this is all happening. Now, plants are an antenna. When we get higher bricks in the plant, we have a better antenna here. When we have better mineralization here, we have a better antenna. So there is a flow of a flow of energy passing through the surface of the earth, and it goes to the North Pole. It goes to magnetic north. And if you dig up roots, you can find predominant roots going to the north. They go with that flow. And so we want to increase the efficiency of this antenna and the efficiency of this antenna. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit. So plants are an energy accumulator, and there is an electromagnetic function of plants. That doesn't mean I fully understand it. I do not. I most definitely do not. But we have to acknowledge that it's there. It is not just soil microbes. It is not just soil chemistry. It's also the electromagnetic that we need to think about in terms of growing a plant. We can look at plants in terms of the three things that I just mentioned. The first one is biology. And sometimes people will only look at plants in terms of biology, and everything they see through their gases is only the aspect of biology. And they're seeing things, and it is correct, but it is not the only thing that's happening. Biology is moving the chemistry. They're manipulating the chemistry. But underneath that is the physics, the electromagnetics. Have you ever noticed the way the roots are shaped? They're shaped and kind of the angles, and I'm not going to do it, but just I'll tell you. The angles of lightning, okay? That's kind of the same shaping of the roots, okay? So the way you get a better root antenna is to make sure you can't just have applied electricity. You have to have, in a circuit board, you have a power supply, but all along that circuit, you have resistors, right? You have to have some resistors in order to manipulate that electricity to do what you want it to do. Okay, what is the main resistor in our soil that kind of helps the plant slow it down and catch it? It is not calcium, no. Where is that? Carbon, right. So carbon is a resistor. So carbon is really, really important, okay, in the electromagnetics of a plant. Okay, so the foundation of plant growth is actually the physics. It's the electromagnetic, but that's kind of like you can look at a problem from way up here or you can look at it right at the ground level. So you have different perspectives, and so the physics is the overall big view. When you're looking at it right up close, you're looking at biology. But just remember, you can look at it from different levels. And don't forget, I mean, it's all three happening simultaneously. Okay? Let's take a quick look of that concept with the tree planting method that Lynn described yesterday. So we have the hole here, and the tree coming up here. So the bottom foot, what did we put in the bottom foot? Well, we threw some minerals in there, right? We put some compost, we put minerals, and we mix that with the topsoil. What do minerals do in soil? As they become soluble, they help to conduct electricity. So we have a zone of conductance. In the middle portion, we put, after the rocks, we put just topsoil mixed with charcoal. Charcoal's an insulator, actually, and there's not much conductance from it unless there's some minerals with the ash. Primarily, it's an insulator. And then back to the top, we had one more conductor. What does that kind of look like? Like a battery. Okay, can we exactly describe how the tree planting method actually makes the plant grow faster? It's energy. It is energy. So we have created a greater environment for the electromagnetism of the plant. And like I said in an email I sent out, the science is not there yet, exactly how this is happening. But we don't have to know the science in order to use the art of it or the effects of it, do we? We can just use it. And we take it and use it, and like what Lynn did, we keep experimenting. Lynn has not stopped changing and trying to experiment what he did. And I believe yesterday was the first time you ever put charcoal with it. So maybe it was bad, but I think it'll do well, okay? So we'll find out. Okay, yes?
What purpose do the rocks serve?
The question was, what do the rocks serve here? The rocks, that's one of those where I don't know. But we believe it works with the making a better electromagnetic structure. Now, Reams had something that he said, where he gave this in kind of a cryptic wording. But he said, the process of osmosis is not limited by time, but photosynthesis is. Okay, so that hardly makes any sense, but he explained it in his teaching courses. And what he basically said is, during the growth phase of a plant, time is not a constraint. In other words, if the energy is there and the environment is there, things can grow extremely rapidly. But once it gets into the reproductive phase, then things slow down and work on a timing basis. Now, I believe that the timing requirements may be much less than we're used to if all the energy is present. Okay? But there is some timing requirements. In the Bible, you read about a vine that grew very fast, and then it was killed by a worm. So I can't totally explain that, because if it grew very fast, it would seem like it had a lot of energy, right? And it would probably be high quality, therefore it shouldn't attract a worm, right? But maybe it was a special worm on a special assignment or something. I don't know. But I believe that that story illustrates that things can grow much faster. Okay? And if we can increase the energy around the antenna in the root and versus in the and also in the above ground, by how we apply minerals, things can speed up dramatically. And I'm sure as gardeners you've seen things where 1 year things took a year and you did something and the time to harvest was a lot less. Okay? Question.
The 5-day radishes and 18 days to produce reed beans, was that using radioactive energy, or how did you achieve that?
Reams believed that radioactivity was another form of energy that increased the growth of plants. So he went and got ore out of a city in Canada called Uranium City. It's there, I checked it, and it is, and he would take the ore from the mining and he would put it in with the potting mix. So, so it was a weak radioactivity, very weak, and he was convinced, studying human health and studying plant growth, that radioactivity can be harnessed in plant growth. And so he recommended, he checked a lot of things for radioactivity, but that may be one aspect to speed things up. Okay? Borglum did with wheat. I know he increased the productivity dramatically, and he also was helping to do the fertility and the breed. There's some breeding, I believe, with it. But I don't know enough of the details to answer the question about Borglum. But I think he was more providing some constraints that were missing in terms of conductivity. I think he addressed that, and he made a dramatic gain, and then breeding as well. But I'm a little weak there, okay? I'm going to need some more water. I don't have enough water up here, so I'm getting thirsty. Okay. Okay, one of the ingredients, okay, so when I formulated the tree planting kit material, one of the ingredients that I put into there was a very strongly paramagnetic rock powder. And so that's in the tree planting kit, and I believe that that is another area that can help enhance the antenna effect of the roots around trees or in the garden. It is not a replacement for minerals, but it may be one thing to enhance it. Okay? So my main topic I'm supposed to talk about right now is soil energy. And so I'm actually going to start with that. I want to talk about, let me say we got a number of mothers here. And so what happens when your kid goes outside to play and plays outside for 3 hours, comes back in and grabs a big drink of water? What's the first thing the kid says to mom? Hungry. I'm hungry, right? And that's that happens. Can you look at your tomato plant and see if that tomato is hungry? So what happens when if you don't feed your kids for a few days and you try to tell them to get out and rake the lawn? Are they going to give you a lot of raked up bags of leaves right away? No, they're going to be hungry. They're going to be low on energy. Right? So they're not going to work as hard. And so what we want to do is to make sure we're addressing the needs of the hunger in the plant. Therese, tell me if I should be taking a break. Just give me you tell me. Okay. I don't see many people getting up. If people start getting up, I'll take a break. Okay. So the plants get hungry. And so what happens as a plant begins to grow, you have the soil and you put all these other nutrients here, and the bacteria are there, the biology is digesting some of these things. They live, and the biology dies. It releases their nutrients back to the plant. The roots pick it up, okay? But as it picks up nutrients, then that's gone. So the nutrients that are in the soil have a property of conducting electricity. So you can measure conductance in the soil. Okay, we're measuring electrolytes, nutrients that carry current in a soil. Okay, and when we have a recommendation for adding drenches, we're adding a fertilizer to water and watering the soil. That's adding nutrients or energy into the soil that you can measure with a conductivity meter. In greenhouses, we do it through the drip line. In dry areas, it's all done through the drip line. But we're adding conductance in the soil. The tool that we use is a conductivity meter. Now there is this is the best form that I have found and we use, because you just push it in and push a button. In my opinion, if you are raising plants, this is your most important tool. Conductivity meter. Okay, it's telling you the sufficiency of your plants. So if you take and put a whole bunch of compost on soil, you want to get a picture? Good. You put a whole bunch of compost on soil, you have a large amount of organic fertilizer releasing the nutrients. So some of it's immediately, but it releases its nutrients throughout the season in the soil. And what will happen? You get a lot of plant growth. You can get very vigorous, luscious plant growth. So you get energy from compost. Okay? It's a good source of energy. If you want high quality produce, though, we need to keep the potassium a little low, and therefore may have too much compost in the past. So then we need to add the specific things that we want. And this is what we use to check it. And so the compost had a benefit. It kind of lasted as a sustain throughout the season. Put a lot on, it would pretty much sustain throughout the season. But the detriment is higher sodium perhaps, or higher potassium. Okay? So I want to demonstrate what we do. The first thing is it's very simple. We have some of the soil that I think is part of that soil test that we had this morning. So we just turn it on, push it into the soil, and it's kind of loose. So I'm going to have to, it doesn't work as well when you've got a lot of air. So what I'm going to do just for this, it's very loose because it got all aerated pretty good, and it's sandy to begin with. So I'm just going to kind of tighten it and push it in kind of like that, more tighter so I get better, firmer contact. And what we have is 330. 330. What is that? It's 330 microsiemens per centimeter. That is the scale. It's microsiemens, or it can be millisiemens. So you divide by 1,000 or multiply by 1,000 to go from microsiemens to millisiemens. I suggest going with microsiemens so that we're kind of all on board. So,
and that's the 2,000 reading, or we can scroll through and the max is 2,000?
That is correct. So you can set this to what's called auto ranging, and it'll start with microsiemens. But if it's too high, it'll immediately switch it over to millisiemens. That's, I think, the best setting for this. So let's say that this is 300 and we're growing tomato. 300 is too low. So what that would be like is if I was working pretty hard, I didn't eat much for lunch, and I had some breakfast, and I came to supper, okay, and I was given an apple, okay? I would be glad that I got an apple, but I wouldn't quite feel it was enough, right? Okay, now maybe with 300 it might be an apple and a banana. Okay, so I got a little bit more, but I still didn't get quite enough, okay? 300 is too low for most crops. Now, if it's green beans and it's making its own nitrogen, 300 is kind of borderline okay. Some of the green crops, it's also maybe okay. I would like to push it just a little bit more. But certainly on a heavy feeding crop, reproductive crops, you want it higher. So you can kind of follow a guideline that's, you know, drench monthly, but you can actually know exactly when to feed it. And so this tells you the plant's version of I'm hungry, okay? And it's a very valuable tool. This costs a fair bit, so it's one of those things you have to put it into the budget. And this is in the 300s for this one. And if you don't feel like bending over so much all the way down, you can get a T-handle one and just kind of go like this, okay, and read it. That's in the 400 range. Kind of pricey, but I can't tell you of a more important tool to have. Any questions? Yes. We're going to do it right now. Okay, the question was asked, would it show conductivity? How quick does it show it? And the real question is, how long does it hold it? Because you want to maintain at a certain level. So what happens is what happens to a plant when the conductivity is low? It goes from thriving to surviving. And so when you're in the business of growing plants, you want them to be very productive. You want to be able to harvest as much produce as you can for your labor and your effort. Okay? So we would add fertilizer to water and then drench and just water in a garden situation, we just add and water the plants. Okay? Yes, question?
That would be, the meter just tells you that you need more electricity, more herbs, whatever you want to do, right? What you put, it doesn't tell you what to put on. Right?
The question was, the meter tells you whether you're low in conductance, but it doesn't tell you what to put on. That's right. That's why you need to know your overall patterns from your soil test. So let's say you have borderline potassium, but you're raising tomatoes. So you need to think of a way to get more potassium with your drenches while you are raising, so that you keep your potassium up. Okay? Yes?
I am one of those
The question was, how do you know what specifics to have for the levels on your conductivity meter for the crop? Yes, okay. Well, do you have kids?
Kids?
Kids. Do you have children?
Yes.
Okay. Do they all eat the same?
No.
No, they don't. And so can I tell you exactly how much that kid of yours should eat? No, I don't know. You're getting far more information here than you're going to go get anywhere else about this concept. We really pushed this, taking it from Reams, but he didn't really get it with this good of a meter. Okay, so now that we got this good of a meter, we're realizing we can do much more progress. And so, as far as I know, we're on the cutting edge. But we don't know all the answers to that. Let me explain why. If you have high conductivity water, that raises your overall level, and so that your base has to be a little higher to go with. So you actually have to watch your plants, experiment, and look at what physiology they're in. So if they're just starting to blossom, it's like they're going to need more nutrients. And if they're early, it's going to be less. And so you got to make your own scale a little bit, but I'm going to give some ranges, but it's subject to what you see on the ground. Question was asked, can you look at a visual to get it into the from whether it's surviving or thriving? And I don't know. I haven't really been, I suppose some very intuitive people can, but I like to just go with a meter kind of based on that. Yes?
So if a plant is drooping, it's surviving, the trigger pressure is low. What is the correlation with conductivity and a drooping plant, low trigger pressure, for example?
Okay, so if a plant is drooping, it's obviously under some major stress. Right. Some of that could be that it's susceptible to that verticillium wilt, for example. But some of it, if it's not that, if it's not a tomato and drooping.
It needs water.
Okay, so if it needs water, obviously you've got to give it some. What was your question?
What would the conductivity meter show with a plant that needs water?
Okay, the question was asked about drooping. That brings up an important question, or thing. This meter, if you put it into very dry soil, it doesn't have as good of contacts at the points. Okay, so it's better to keep your water moist and then read it to get the accurate reading. So I could not get, I knew it was only showing 50 when I was just putting it in. It was so fluffy. Okay, moisture brings better contact here. So that is probably the one weakness of this meter. So the standard recommendation is if you water and then you wait a bit, about a half an hour, and then put it in, then you're very consistent with when you take your reading, and then you get a better reading. Yes?
Do you personally measure water capacity in a soil yourself, and will you make that assay?
Do we measure the water?
A meter.
Do I use this meter?
No. You want to know about when to irrigate. It's about how much water is available to the plant. Do you take time to measure it yourself?
I don't raise crops with irrigation myself.
Okay, you're lucky.
Okay, so I mostly just feel the soil, and when it needs it, I water it, and if the conductivity is low, then I add fertilizer into the water and then water it that way. But that's where I'm at. Did you have a question? Yes. And then the question was, if I'm doing reproductive, would I then do more reproductive elements? Yes, but if your calcium was overall low in your soil, then you go back, you're basically going back and forth, because you have to have calcium for these other things to react against. Okay? Yes?
John, how deep do you know to push that conductivity?
Question, how deep do you measure? There's no set thing, but I would say that try to do it consistently, generally. I would like to get past the dry zone, and I like to go about 3 inches in and do 3 inches. Now, I also will push it down further just to see what it does as I go down. And a lot of times you can see, oh yeah, that rain we had last week, it pushed all the minerals. The energy's more about 6 inches down. So you still need to come in and get it back up on top. But one thing I've also will tell you is, if you sprinkle during the growing season, you sprinkle a little transplant formula on the surface, it'll bring the energy up on the surface up immediately, instantly. It's very fast. So anyway, I would say 3 inches and try to be consistent. Luke and I were talking, and you can put like a piece of black tape on here, and just so you know which is right where it's at, and then you can see where your thing is. Don't do it in dry soil. Dry soil is not going to give you a good answer. Question was asked about doing that in conjunction with this. You can. I find that whole method leads to more questions than answers, and I would rather do things based on what I know from the soil test and the physiology of the plant. Just, that's my perspective. It's probably got value, but if I say do this leaf test, I'm going to get a lot of calls coming in, and I'm not going to have much answers. Okay? So I don't prefer all those calls. Okay? I like to talk, but you know, I don't have the answers a lot of times. Yes. Question was asked, how far from the center of the plant do you go? Well, if you have drip lines and you're putting some nutrients out in this drip line, you definitely want to be within that range. Otherwise, I just go just a few inches from the plant. Sometimes I angle it right under. A lot of times I angle it right where I know there's roots. If you put transplant formula, you will see it, or even jubilate, you will actually see that when you poke right into where you know it's at, because it'll be quite a bit higher. Now that doesn't last all season, but it does last for a while. Okay? All right, let me see where I'm at on my notes here. Okay, well, I'm gonna do a demonstration here. So here's, we know that we had 330 here. I'm gonna check where the water is at all by itself. This is well water. And the water itself is 373. Okay, so there's gonna be dissolved calcium, magnesium, maybe some iron, some things, maybe some sodium. I don't know if there's much sodium in here, but there's dissolved minerals. So the water itself is at 300. Okay? Now the rate that we typically do for most drenches is 1 ounce of drench per gallon of water. That's just a real rough guideline. And so, maybe not on the speaker. Okay. So we have some Alaska fish fertilizer. I'm just going to put a little of this in, and I'm just kind of going to guess this. But this is organic version of fish. It's going to give nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, quite a bit of sodium is in here, about 1% salt total. So you can put a little of this in. I guess that would be about right for now. And then we're going to just go ahead and check it just out of curiosity. So this moved up to 4.2, up to 5. It's a little bit variable. Somewhere around 5 millisiemens, which is the same thing as 5,000 ergs, okay? So there's a lot of nutrients that affect conductivity in a fertilizer or in a drench, okay? And a lot of times you see 5 to 7 is what you'll see in when you put fertilizers or drenches in with water.
So it was a 300 and went up to 5,000.
That's right. Went from 300 to 5,000. And so now you've got, say your tomato plant is in here and it's surviving. It's trying to produce something, and at 300 you won't find a lot of blossoms because it doesn't have enough energy to fill what it has and get new blossoms. So the blossoms are less. So now we just water like a normal watering would be, and there we go. We've just watered our plant. So we've fertilized or we've put energy. Now in the drenches that you get from the garden program, we also put in carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are for the bacteria, actually. And then for good measure, we add bacteria. Since we're doing this, we might as well just make it even better. So that's what we normally do with when we do the drenching. A little bit, the carbohydrates are in with the minerals, and then we just add in the live bacteria in the form of Z-hume during the season, or as we drench. Okay, so I'm going to set this down. And now I'm going to go back to the soil and check it again. Question? Okay, so there's, you mentioned that you believe you take a sample and feed it twice. Do 2 samples. If you're up in the northern part of the country, once a year is sufficient. Just decide whether you're going to do it in spring or fall. If you start in the spring, you may want to consider doing it in a fall. In that situation, you would do it 2 times in 1 year, but then from that point on, you'd soil test fall to fall to fall. If you're in the south and you're double cropping, and then you may want to do twice, especially if you're starting with depleted soil. So you don't need to do it 2 times normally.
But my question really, your recommendation?
No, normally you're feeding it with a liquid. Question? Yeah, you're feeding it during the season, and this is keeping energy up. You're keeping electrical conductance up in the soil. Okay, so I just poked it in. Now there's a lot of buffering capacity in soil, and so I put it on, and it was like 917. So it went from 300 to 917. And if you wait for another hour, it's going to probably be down to about 700, 600, probably 700, 800, somewhere in there. And then you could see that your plants are doing well. It's like you were really hungry, you're a little shaky, and now you got your food, okay? And so now the plants are going to get back to work, okay? Yes. Okay, the question was asked at the same time, could you also apply foliar nutrition? Okay, so if you are having some kids that are really hungry and haven't eaten, is that the time you say, now go clean out the garage? Get everything cleaned out and clean it up. No, probably you should feed them first and then send them out to the garage, right? Okay, so foliar feeding should be done when the energy is up. Okay? Feed, because a foliar spray says, get to work. Okay? Okay? So you want the energy here so the plant can get to work. And if it's a little high, it'll take longer to come down. Don't worry about, you're not going to exactly get it precise because you don't know the buffering capacity exactly of the soil. Now over time you'll get a feel for how much you should put down, but the physiology is changing.
But I'm talking about a calibration per square foot or per square meter or something like that. How
much to apply, totally based on the size of your land. Yeah. Roughly 1 ounce per gallon of water, and just give a regular watering.
1 ounce?
If you're, 1 ounce per gallon. If you're doing something through the drip lines, then specific quantities will be recommended as well.
Well, 1 ounce per gallon for how much surface?
Doesn't matter. Just do what you would normally do to water that amount. So put an ounce in a gallon and just water what you would just a smaller, it's a fairly light watering. So you,
50 gallons, I'd put 50 ounces.
that's right. So the ratio is there, always there. And then how much you water would be just kind of like a normal watering. As if you're going to water for...
Fertigation, this is out of a cater on a tractor or hand.
So what is your crop?
It's flowers.
It's flowers. Okay, and it's in an open field?
Correct. Well, beds in a field.
Beds in a field. Okay, well, you can also use dry to do the same thing, and it lasts a lot longer. You can broadcast fertilizers. Okay, the question was about Z-Hume. The carrier of Z-Hume is a liquid humate, but the active part of it is a bacterial package that can be helpful in aerobic, but it also can work kind of in an anaerobic environment and higher salts. So it's a good bacterial package for that. All right, I'm going to keep going with this. I'm running out of time here. So some of the heavy feeding crops are corn, tomatoes, and cannabis. So we're working with some medical cannabis growers, and it's very equivalent to tomatoes. So got to keep the nutrients going there. I guess all that heavy oil stuff takes some energy. Okay. Most of the other crops, 300 to 500 on the micro Siemens. But remember, your base might be higher if you're in a saline environment, if your conductivity of water is higher. So watch your crop. When you fertigate, does it give you the response like it's doing well? So that's just kind of the rough guidelines, but you have to make your own guidelines. So 300 to 500 for most other crops. Corn, tomatoes, cannabis, a little higher, 600 plus. Very subject to your observations. And people ask me, how much do I give for, what do I keep the energy at conductivity? And I ask them back, how much food do you feed a boy? And I finally got a good answer. So as much as he can eat. So that's the kind of the range for that. One thing you don't want to do is you don't want to say, okay, I'm low conductivity. Now I just gave a drench of the ocean water. I brought the conductivity up. That's not the conductivity we're after. That's primarily sodium chloride. Some of the trace minerals are helpful. You want to do that primarily with fertilizers. You definitely don't want to use salt to bring your conductivity up. That's defeating the purpose. Okay? Okay, has anybody heard of the MMR? Measles, mumps, and rubella. Well, I'm going to change the order around, and I'm going to talk about MRM. So not such a bad topic what I'm talking about, okay? Okay, so MRM. And so we got microbes, roots, and minerals. Okay, so how many have heard of the 80-20 principle? Anybody? Okay, is it important? Very, very, very important, right? So the concept is what are the 20% things that will give you 80% of the results? And so you can apply 80-20 in all areas of your life and see it. But you can also apply 80-20 into growing high-quality crops. So I was reading about the 80-20 and I was learning about it, and there was the strong teaching that you can apply 80-20 into relationships. So I thought, And they say you can apply it into your relationship with your spouse. So I was thinking, okay, how do you apply 80-20 to relationships? Well, I figured one little way. I wrote a letter to my wife in the morning and stuck it on the fridge. You know how long it took me for effort? 3 minutes, right? It was pretty well worth it. That's 80-20. You got good results from a short amount of effort, right? Okay? Very valuable. Okay, so we can do things in growing a crop that we have to think in terms of 80-20. What are the critical things? And getting every last weed may not be the best use of our time. You know, it's important to not let it get overrun. Okay, so I want to talk about the 80-20 of plant health. Okay? So this is very important. I'm going to start a new page so that it's a little bit higher. Okay. Okay, so this is minerals. Over here. Here's roots, and here's microbes. And I'll get out of the way so people can see here. Minerals, minerals, roots, and this is the 80-20 of plant health. In other words, this is the key area to focus on and really get this working right, and you're going to get 80% of the benefits here. So we really start, if you do a soil test, the first thing you always will get back is a recommendation, and the most important thing is that broadcast of minerals, right? That is foundation. So we start with here. When you get minerals to a plant, you have a supply of plant sugars that go to the roots. Plant sugars go to the roots. And when we have a deficiency of minerals, we have a deficiency of carbohydrates being produced. We have a deficiency of carbohydrates. The microbes, the plant, the roots are not as well, they do not proliferate as well. They do not have enough support. So the roots are a delivery mechanism of putting sugars out to the microbes. Okay, so here we have from the roots, we have energy to microbes. So when we get minerals, especially important is we also get calcium. And calcium is very important for getting a large proliferation of roots. And then we use those roots as the delivery mechanisms to send plant sugars out, which becomes energy for the microbes. Okay? And then what happens is after we get here, we have the microbes proliferate. They take biology, they take minerals out of the soil, they digest them, they incorporate them into their body, and they die. And the plant roots then get the minerals back up, and so you have minerals going back to the plant. So you got minerals back to the plant. Okay, so this thing is a cycle. Okay, so remember, a plant is all about accumulating energy. And it works through a biology. And the biology, so I'm going to come back to this. Well, let me just talk about roots. So on a root, we have the roots give off gels and fine root hairs. So there's fine root hairs that slough off, and then there's gels that come off the root. And the more the plant is making carbohydrates up above, the more its roots are proliferating into the soil. And they die. And that's food for bacteria. So bacteria have a very important need. They need sugars. They can get the minerals, but they got to have the sugars. Now, in our drench, we always add carbohydrates. Most of the time we use molasses, but you can use a syrup, you can use sugar, and we add that with the minerals in order to get a stimulation of bacteria. Okay, so now you have a fine little layer, just like this little film around the root, and you have just millions of bacteria surrounding this. And you can see this under a microscope, and this is called a biofilm. Now, we want all the roots to be surrounded by this whole cloud of bacteria and biology right around the root. That's a biofilm. And this area, in this area, there's soil, and there's root, and there's microbes in that whole area. And that is called the rhizosphere. Rhizosphere. I'm not going to try to spell it. R-H, I think, I-Z-O-S-P-H-E-S-P-E-R-E, something. Close enough. Rhizosphere. That is the interaction of roots, microbes, and soil. Very, very important. And in this area, the soil pH is 2 points lower than the surrounding pH. Okay, remember, if the pH is 7.3 but we're short of calcium, I'm adding calcium carbonate. And people say, you can't do it, it's not available. Well, when you got 2 pH points lower, that's a 5.3, right, of the soil. So you don't have to worry that the plants can't get that calcium. They will get it. Okay, so the roots, well, we're working with roots to create healthy plants. Plants, but the biology must be supported. Okay, so that's what's happening here in the roots, that whole rhizosphere and the biofilm around each root. So there's a trading going on, and it's almost like a marketplace. So you got your potatoes, and I am working on fixing shoes. And so for your potatoes, I fix your shoes, right? And so we have bacteria and other forms of biology giving up minerals that the plant can grab. The plant has to have that so it can make sugars. Then it sends those sugars down to the roots, and it goes around and around, right? And so, but what happens if you don't have enough minerals in the soil? The marketplace now has an economic depression, right? The bacteria and the biology don't have anything to exchange with. The plants can't get the minerals that it needs to make enough sugars, and now the bacteria aren't supported. Now they're not working for you. So we have to work the biology with this. And so the starting point is to get the minerals out. The starting point to get this whole cycle starting is minerals. That's why the broadcast of minerals is so important. Now what happens when you foliar spray? You circumvent the roots, but you have actually brought more minerals into the system. You foliar spray, you bring more minerals into the system. What if you're raising in a greenhouse and you're, was that a little better? I'm sorry if that, can you, okay, what if you're raising in a greenhouse and you've got quite a few tomato plants, and the plants are sucking up so much nutrients that you don't have enough minerals? That's why we drench. So right here, we're adding some drenching right here into the soil. We add carbohydrates, we add more minerals, and that starts the whole cycle of minerals to the plant. Okay? So why do we fertilize in the season? Because we want to keep more minerals coming to the plant. So the plant can make more sugars, so it makes a crop, but it also makes it goes down to the roots. Research says somewhere around 30% of the sugars made in the plant are going to go to the roots. And it varies a little by plant species. And maybe even grasses, I've heard, are up to 50%. they send to the roots. And so we want to start this whole thing with the minerals. And I think that we can get more results with the most pointed effort. So it's the 80-20 is to start here with the minerals. So that kind of leads me into the subject of foliar spraying. Any questions on that cycle? Okay.
When you say the minerals are going to the roots, you mean and then out into the soil?
No, the sugars are going to the roots.
Right. Okay.
The sugars are going to the roots, so you're feeding you're feeding your bacteria through the roots.
Okay.
Now it takes minerals to build the roots too. You got to have calcium especially. Yes.
Foliar sprays always have some additive for sugar in them, I believe what you...
Yes, we always want to add some sugars. That's to make effective penetration.
Is there any reason why honey couldn't replace molasses or dextrose?
Say the question?
Is there any reason why honey couldn't replace molasses or dextrose?
So could honey replace molasses or dextrose in a foliar spray?
Yes.
They're an antibacterial honey.
And it's concentrated form. Yeah, honey is an antibacterial. I don't know. That would be pretty expensive. I think the number one reason you wouldn't do it, it's already a food source that you can sell.
I'm a beekeeper.
You're a beekeeper. Well, I would always say experiment. We've learned a lot from listening, from hearing back from experiments. So that's important. There is a reason why we use dextrose, because it works really superior. It's a 6-carbon sugar, and it works better for plants generally to get the foliar spray nutrients into the leaf. Yes?
I just had a question that additional things to put in, maybe you can talk about this, but I've heard of having a certain amount of nitrogen in the foliar feed also for carrying, for transporting across the leaf.
Yeah, there's a ways to build that, and we're going to talk about penetration. Okay, so nitrogen, yeah, most of the foliar sprays have a little nitrogen in it. Okay. So I have talked a lot of things, and some people are probably very much with a background of organic only, and I'm not organic only. I am all about nutrient density. I'm all about getting more nutrients in the foods that we eat. So is there anybody has concerns about that whole concept, and maybe want me to go into that topic? About why why I'm not so bought into the organic concept? Okay, I will do that briefly. My concern with organics has been that there's no standard of quality, and I don't see a standard ever happening. And so the other thing is that organics has been many times not, because there's no standard, there hasn't been the result of quality. So you can figure that it's more non-toxic, but not necessarily better in its density. And so organics has said that a chemical fertilizer that goes through a conversion, so a chemical fertilizer has converted from limestone to calcium nitrate. Therefore, it's not natural, therefore it's bad. And I would say that that's not true in the biological sense. In biology, the use of calcium nitrate is not a negative. It's a positive when you need growth energy, for example. It's a positive when you want to get calcium through the leaf and you put it as part of a foliar spray. And so I'm actually after measurable results in terms of quality rather than the ideology of organics. So that's kind of my background. But the Mittliner method, for example, is only using soluble nutrients. It does not use rock powders to speak of. It may use some limestone. I don't know. There must be some limestone. Okay, but it doesn't do the broad spectrum. And I believe if you raise children, I always like to talk about children because there's so many parallels here. If you provide a warm place to stay. I mean, that's a good starting point. They don't have to sleep in a snowbank. That's good, right? Okay, so that's kind of like your broadcast of minerals. That's pretty good. But, you know, you do kind of need to feed them too. So you got to feed them, right? So that's your feed the soil. Now, there's one thing missing if you did that for children, and they need a job. If the kids grow up with nothing to do, you don't have good kids, right? They have to have some work, right? All the parents are, yep. Okay, so we also want bacteria to have a job, right? If all we do is spoon feed the plant with solubles, what do the bacteria have to do? Not much, so they're not going to be doing much. It's not going to be a healthy plant. And the produce won't taste as good. So while soluble nutrients are useful as a tool, they should never become the major thing that takes care of your plant. Okay? Okay, let me check here. So the process of making soluble nutrients uses energy to kind of do what bacteria does. Bacteria reduce insoluble to the soluble. Commercial fertilizers do that with energy, and then you apply it, and so it basically does the same thing with energy. Okay, foliar sprays increase the cycle of that 80-20. Okay, so that 80-20 back here, when you begin to foliar spray, you increase this cycling. Okay, and that's the basic core of why you would foliar spray. You want to get more minerals to the leaves, which would then make more plant sugars, and you just get this thing rolling around. That's why. It's not to so that we sell more foliar sprays. Okay, it's to get more benefit back from the plant and back from the soil, and all the effort and energy that you put into the broadcast, you want that coming back up into the food you're selling or growing. Okay? All right. I never made it up there. I'm going to need some more water. I'm sorry. Somebody can do that. I appreciate that. All right. So there's three. We work a lot with foliar feeding, and we think that there's this is on the cutting edge of agriculture. It's been for a while. Can somebody tell me who your favorite author is for books on foliar feeding? That's not nutrients. That's just putting bacteria on. There is no books published that I am aware of. Do you know of any?
Well, I like Graham Sate. He's got some good ideas.
Okay, Nourishment Homegrown has some reams teaching about foliar feeding. Okay, so that's the only book that does cover some things that I am aware of. And that goes back to reams. Okay, Graham Sate has some things you're saying? Yeah. Okay. Okay. There's no major books that other than these, there's not any books. I am aware of one scientific proceeding. Why are there not many books on foliar feeding? Okay. My theory is that the people that don't really quite understand it don't want to write a book because it won't really work out too well, and they won't look so well. Okay? That's my theory. And then the people that do understand it pretty well don't really want to give away all their secrets. So they don't write about it. I don't know. That's my theory. So I am thinking that we have to really push foliar feeding, and if we want to get the results and the return from the other things we're doing, foliar feeding can take us from good to excellent. Now, that's a progress. Oh, thank you very much. Yep. So I have thought about how do you teach foliar feeding? And so I put together a kit which takes from some of our line of products from the garden, some from our agriculture products, and some from a newly developed line for commercial retail, like in a garden center versions of some of our products. And so a foliar spray has to meet some requirements. First of all, number one, you have to have solubility. Okay, it has to be soluble. In other words, you have to present, this is not a root system now. We don't have a full microbial community that's fully developed on the leaf. There's some. I'm in trouble.
They're saying they got food ready up there,
So I'm going to put it on, I'm going to speed it up then.
speed it up.
Okay. Okay. Solubility. Nah. Okay. You must have leaf penetration. I mean, these are basic, but a lot of foliar sprays, they don't have much of that, and they fail with this. Okay? And number 3, you must have mobility. Okay? Now, it is kind of easy to make a foliar spray with NPKs. It's not that hard. You can take phos acid liquid fish, so it's phosphoric acid liquid fish, throw a little bit of seaweed in there, and you got a decent foliar spray, really. Okay? It's another thing to try to get calcium through the leaf, mobile to the plant to get it to that blueberry. That's not so easy. In fact, science not sure that can be done. It can be, but they're not sure. Okay? It can be. And so we want to augment calcium, trace minerals, some of the major minerals. This can ramp up that whole thing with the plant. So I have made a foliar spray kit, so I'm going to get into a little bit of a commercial so people can see if you want it. I have put 12 different foliar sprays. I was going to demonstrate how easy it is to do, but I'm just going to show you a little bit of what I have. So I got 12 different sprays. So here's one, foliar for blooms. It's an organic one. This one happens to be organic. We've got a recipe book, a foliar spray container, 2 little measurements, a mini measure, a bigger measure to stir it in and pour it into the foliar sprayer, and then a recipe ring. To just so there's recipes for blooming, growth, calcium, bulking, immunity enhancer, and I got to tell you one. I got to talk about one. One is a biofortification spray. Yes?
Change your plans, you have 15 minutes.
I have 15 minutes. Okay. Okay. So one of the products that I recently worked on is an iodine spray. And so there's been some research being done on something called biofortification. And so if you search it on the internet, you'll get scientific. My 2 hours are up. Okay, you'll get some scientific papers that show if you put iodine in the soil, you will actually have a higher rate of iodine in the plant tissue, and you can end up getting a better form of iodine than if you get iodized salt. So what we try to do in the garden program, we want to do that. We put kelp meal in the garden program. Okay? The other thing is there's kelp meal in a very fine powdered form as part of this. We want to fortify the plants. But there's also a way to do that with foliar spray. And so this is Way Ahead iodine, and it's a kind of a nice color. And you can see there's a recipe in there for that. And this whole kit is put together and sells for $250. And we take care of it afterwards. 12 different sprays plus a rock powder spray to provide CO2 and some trace minerals with extremely fine rock powder, which does not follow this. But it gets into the plant, and the plant actually kind of digests it down a little bit and makes it more soluble over time, but it releases some CO2 in the process. So that's what that's for. Okay. I didn't cover a lot on foliar feeding because I thought I was running out of time. I'll just stop and take some questions here. Any questions so far? Yes?
Have you started that book yet yourself on foliar spray?
Well, I'm going to write for this, and that'll be a basis for a lot of a book. Okay? I'm going to get this goes with some additional teaching that will be made available online to people who have this kit. Yes.
If I understand it right, you are achieving 80-20 result with foliar by supplying minerals at the right time to mitigate the lack of minerals available through the roots. Is that what's happening?
We are pushing the plants for or toward beyond. Okay, so I'll go back to kids. If you have a son and you have fed him good and he takes care of him, if you say to him, get to work, that's pretty valuable. That little effort is pretty valuable, and you might get a lot of results. A foliar spray directs, it does several things. It supplies some minerals that starts that cycle of going around. But it also supplies energy to, say, make blossoms or make grow vegetatively. So it's kind of like saying to your kid, get to work. Is that a good thing? Yeah, they need it. It may be not the good thing if he's just worked 18 hours, right? But you want to push that plant to produce. Now, some people will say that's bad. You know, just let it be natural. That's fine. But you can improve the return on your investment from all the other things you're doing. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes.
Okay.
You're not focused on biology here, you're focused on mineral.
On foliar feeding, we're very much focused on mineral.
Because the biology benefits from mineral.
The biology in the root or the biology on the leaf? Are you?
I would think both.
Okay, I disregard the biology on the leaf. I don't pay attention to it. Well, yeah, there's some sugars in the foliar sprays. We have dextrose that we want to put in with it, and so, but there may be low pHs, and it could kill them on the leaf. But it starts a great process. Now, what's so important about biology on the leaf? Well, the teaching is that it helps prevent against disease and problems. And if you have a lower quality or a poorer quality plant, you have more susceptibility. But if you have the calcium and the phosphorus and things working right, you're not struggling near as much with insect and disease pressure. So the purpose of that leaf biology is not that important. It's extremely important at the root. And so if you foliar spray, you might sacrifice some of the leaf biology. I don't know. But I'm not concerned. Yes?
This is different from aerated compost tea.
Entirely different than aerated compost tea. The purpose of that is to apply a coating. Essentially, it's a biofilm for the leaf, essentially. And it may do some good, but we're after minerals penetrating the leaf and starting that cycle of more sugars and directing the plant to produce. So you could take green beans, and if you foliar spray foliar for blooms, which is in here, or you take and make your own, you can go back the next day and see all sorts of little white blossoms. You're going to get a lot more green beans just by feeding and directing that plant with a foliar spray. Okay, it'll be a quite a bit significant amount of increase. Same way, I've had people buy a foliar spray and they go out into the woods where there's raspberries and they foliar spray for reproduction. They come back in 2 days later and they got a lot more raspberries. They're just foliar spraying in the woods. Okay. Yes. Question was asked, are you trying to spray under the leaf? If you have a very well-formulated foliar spray, you can penetrate on the surface of the leaf. You do not need to have in the soil, under the leaf. And I did want to demonstrate a little bit on when I say foliar spray. So here's the sprayer. Okay, I put the spray in. Let's say I got a bed here. Okay, you pump it up. Okay, when we foliar spray, we just suggest a light misting. just like this. Just go like this as you're walking along. You're not worrying that you didn't get every leaf on the inside. You're just doing something very brief, very quick. Okay, and that's, so it doesn't need to be laborsome. Foliar spraying does not need to be extremely bending over and trying to get everything under there. Don't worry about that. The still has an atomizer attachment that can make it really fine fog, and that is probably a very good thing to add. That would do a finer job, but I will tell you that they now have a mini model that is 2 or 2.5 gallons, and so it's not nearly so heavy. And I've talked to people who went from the old one to the new one, and they don't want to go back.
It's a killer.
Yeah.
It's a horse to run it.
Yes.
What sprayer, John?
There's a still backpack sprayer, and they have kind of a mini model. They had one that was like 4 gallons full. Wasn't it full?
11 liters is over 4 gallons.
Okay, 11 liters, and by the time you get it on, I mean, it's pretty heavy. And so they were having some of their kids work, and they found that it was really heavy and cumbersome. And so they went to the new one, which just came out recently, which is 2 or 2.5 gallons. And it's still backpack, but it's much lighter weight. And with the atomizer attachment, you still can get a nice misting fog, and you can walk over and spray very quickly. Right. So what you want on a foliar spray for most all of these sprays is a fine misting where it just barely coats the leaf, and you don't see runoff on the leaf. The question was asked, is it safe to use? Yes, it's safe. You would not be, what I would do is you're walking along. I mean, I would spray in such a way that if there's a breeze, it's kind of going the other way. But I wouldn't be trying to walk into the fog. But other than that, I would not worry about it. And this is not anything like, like these chemical herbicides, pesticides, that a little drift will make your plants grow all funny. This is just nutrients, and you're really pretty close. And so by the time you're here, it's hardly going anywhere except right there. There is a way to go into a greenhouse, fog up the whole greenhouse on half of it, and then step back and kind of fog it up. And then I would just stay out of that just so you don't breathe that. But it's just, that's only for a few minutes. Okay, good points there. Question was asked, what time of day, what kind of water? The best water is low conductivity water. So if you have a reverse osmosis, that's very good. If you capture rainwater, that's excellent. If you have distilled water, that's also excellent. So that's the best. And then if you have, if you have surface water from a pond and you can filter that, if it's around 200 or less ergs, very good. So that's the best water. I prefer on small scale just to use a little distilled water. And then time of day, if you go outside and you feel muggy and hot and sticky, that's not a good time to spray. The high humidity and the heat of the day are 2 times to be a little cautious about. It's a little hard on the plant too. So over 85 degrees, you want to maybe wait till the cool of the day or get it in the morning. If it's real high humidity, leave that for another time.
How often should it be done?
How often do you foliar spray? I would recommend weekly for most things. A weekly spray is pretty good. We have growers that have taken this to another level. People who have strawberries have done this where they spray 6 days a week on their strawberries. They use amaze, they use PGR, they use dextrose at lower rates, and what happens is they take, whenever they spray their strawberries, the center core of that strawberry, if you cut it in half, instead of being white, it's red, and the juice is red, and it comes from having the foliar spray, and they harvest it, and about 3 days later it's gone pale again. Okay, but if they foliar spray more frequently, it stays a brilliant red. And that is very much more sellable. Okay, now that's with amaze, so that's the calcium going into that, and it makes it a nicer berry. Question was asked about overwatering and rainfall. What happens when you get a lot of rain or overwatering is you get a dilution of your nutrients and your conductivity goes down, and then your plants go into stress when the conductivity gets too low. I've seen a lot of blossom end rot come on zucchini, on tomatoes from over amount of rain. And so the thing that you need to do is get that meter back out, and the next day when you can get back out, you fertigate and get that energy back up, and then keep watching, because as the soil dries, it'll kind of be concentrating, so then you may not need to fertigate for a while, because as it dries, it might concentrate. Maybe it's not enough. But we've had people get 6 inches of rain, and the next day they're out there fertigating. Seems kind of silly, but it stopped the blossom end rot on their zucchini immediately. The ones that were forming while it had that rain, they got blossom end rot and died. But the new ones, after they fertigated, were all whole, and so they were selling them at $1 a piece. So it was valuable. Yes.
So with fertigation, any experience with the solids in the solution, are they clogging the systems, your products?
For fertigation, well, we have two lines. We have a drenching system, which is more like in a watering can method or just kind of watering. And so that's got fish-based stuff in it. The dry solubles are 100% soluble, and you will not have a problem unless you try to mix a calcium-containing drench with a phosphorus-containing drench, and then they create bond. So we always recommend them separately and water in between. So you should have no problem there. Yes?
Are any of these usable for certified organic?
On the foliar sprays? I haven't certified most of these. We have a bacteria that's Stimulate, that's certified organic. And we haven't done a lot of this for the garden stuff because it's a lot of them. We have some organic products, and most of them are not certified organic. So then we just go to like straight liquid fish and molasses and seaweed, and we give a recipe, and then you just make your own sprays or all that. Question?
On your foliars, it's not a replacement for your fertilization program. It's an enhancement at key times. Is that correct?
Question was asked, foliars, it's not a replacement for your soil. That is correct. It is an enhancement. It makes you get a greater return for what you did already. If you can sometimes with a foliar program and keeping the energy up, you can tell your cucumber plants to keep putting on blossoms, and if you keep the energy up, it's not unreasonable to double your yield. I mean, cucumbers are pretty prolific anyway. Maybe you don't want to do that, but if you're trying to sell stuff, it's pretty valuable. Yes?
One more question on your sprays in response to your answer about organic, that they're not certified organic. Is there anything in those foliar sprays that you sell that would be harmful to bees?
Harmful to bees on any of the sprays? Well, some of them have, I think if you directly sprayed it while a bee was passing by, that might be a strong chemical, which probably would be a little harmful. But I don't see it being detrimental in the long run as far as overall. I mean, you wouldn't drink a lot of these either because they have nitrates in it and you'd get a heart attack. But for plants, that's not a problem. So it's not like the chemical things that are persistent and killing. I think we're done here. We're going to have supper, so thank you very much.